Okay, now let's look at the next part of the chapter, which is 11.3 over perception and individualized behavior. Now, perception is the process of interpreting and understanding one's own behavior or one's own environment. The process can be boiled down to 4 steps. You can see those here. Those are selective attention, interpretation and evaluation, storing in memory, and retrieving from memory to make judgments and decisions. And here on the figure 11.2 here, you can see those 4 steps and kind of some questions that you can ask yourself in each of those steps. So selective attention, did I notice something? Interpretation and evaluation, what was it I noticed and what does it mean? Storing in memory, remember it as an event, a concept, person, or possibly all 3. And lastly, the 4th step in the perpetual process, retrieving from memory to make judgments and decisions. What do I recall about that? Now, in any one of these 4 stages of the perception process, there is the possibility for misunderstandings or errors in judgment. There are 4 distortions in perception. Stereotyping, which is the tendency to attribute to an individual that characteristics one believes are typical of the group to which that individual belongs. Principal areas of stereotyping that are of concern to managers are sexual stereotypes, age stereotypes, and of course race ethnicity stereotypes. A sexual stereotype is a belief that differing traits and abilities make males and females particularly well suited to different roles. There does not seem to be a pro-male bias in hiring recommendations or in performance ratings. However, the promotional decisions may still be affected by sexual stereotyping. Age stereotyping tend to depict older workers as less involved in their work, less satisfied, less motivated, and less committed than younger workers. Research shows that job involvement, satisfaction, motivation, and commitment increase with age. The stereotype that older workers have higher absenteeism when an employee doesn't show up for work is also not supported by any research. Because the median age of Americans is increasing, managers will probably be dealing with an older workforce. Race ethnicity stereotypes still exist. There are a lot of Hispanic or African American managers in the U.S. compared to whites and Asians. However, new census data shows that in 14 of 25 largest metropolitan areas, more immigrants were employed in white-collar occupations than in lower-wage work such as construction or cleaning. Next, we have the halo effect. We inform an impression of individuals based on a single trait and generalization that single trait into any array of other positive traits. Let me say that one more time. The halo effect is we form an impression of an individual based on a single trait and generalize that single trait into an array of other positive traits. This phenomenon is also called the horn and halo effect because a single negative trait can also be generalized into other traits. It has been shown that attractive people generally are treated better than unattractive people. A manager should look at all of an individual's traits. Next, we have the recency effect, which is the tendency to remember decent information or recent information better than earlier information. This may happen because when you activate your recall, the later recollections are still present in your working memory. And lastly, we have the causal attribution, which is the activity of inferring causes for observed behavior. We constantly formulate cause and effect explanations for our own and others' behaviors. These attributions may be invalid, but they profoundly affect organizational behavior. There are 2 attributional tendencies that can distort one's interpretation of observed behaviors, and this is in the fundamental attribution bias. People attribute another person's behavior to his or her personal characteristics rather than to any of the situational factors. And then there's the self-serving bias, and in the self-serving bias, people tend to take more personal responsibility for success than for failure. So for a simple recall here, The four types of distortion in perception are stereotyping, the halo effect, the recency effect, and cash flow attribution. Alright, now we will look at 11.4, which is over work-related attitudes and behaviors managers need to deal with. Managers need to be alert to work-related attitudes having to do with employee engagement, which is an individual's involvement, satisfaction, and enthusiasm for work. Job satisfaction, the extent to which you feel positive or negative about various aspects of your work. And 3, organizational commitment, which is reacting or reflecting the extent to which an employee identifies with an organization and is committed to its goals. Now, attitudes are important because attitudes affect behavior. Now, we look at employee engagement. Engaged employees are expected to be more committed and put more effort in their job. Case study suggests that employee performance increases about 10% when employees are engaged and increases 50% when they have both high engagement and high enablement, which is a very supportive environment. People who are positive or optimistic, proactive, conscientious, and mindful are thought to be more likely to be engaged employees. Job security and feelings of psychological safety also propel job engagement. When we look at job satisfaction here, employees' overall satisfaction depends on how they feel about several components such as work, pay, promotions, coworkers, and supervision. Job satisfaction and job performance seem to be moderately related, but the relationship is complex. When we look again at organizational commitment, which once again reflects the extent to which an employee identifies with the organization and is committed to the organizational goals. Research shows us that a strong relationship between organizational commitment and job satisfaction. As a manager, you need to learn how to manage individual differences so that you can influence employees to do their best work. Among the types of behaviors that managers need to influence are performance and productivity, absenteeism, this is when an employee decides not to show up for work, and turnover, when employees leave your organization. Thirdly, organizational citizenship behaviors, those employee behaviors that are not directly part of the employee's job descriptions, those that exceed the work role requirements. And lastly, counterproductive work, which are behaviors that harm employees and the organization as a whole. Let's take a look at absenteeism and turnover. And absenteeism may be a precursor to turnover, so you need to be watchful of that. And while organizations experience some turnover, that's just expected, a high turnover rate is highly undesirable because replacement and training costs the organization lots of money. Experience demonstrates that there are 5 practical ways to reduce turnover. Base hiring decisions on how well an applicant's value fits your overall organizational values. Provide post-hiring support to new employees. Focus on enhancing employee engagement, which we've talked about before. Incorporate realistic job reviews into your hiring process so that your employee knows what to expect. And offer employee benefits such as flexible work hours that meet your employees' needs and values. When we look at organizational citizenship behaviors, research demonstrates a positive correlation between organizational citizenship behaviors, job satisfaction, and performance. We look at our CWBs, our counterproductive work behaviors. These are types of behaviors that harm employees and the organization as a whole. Examples of these CWBs are absenteeism, drugs and alcohol, sexual harassment, unfortunately violence, theft, and white-collar crime. Employees are less likely to engage in these counterproductive work behaviors if they have satisfying jobs that offer autonomy or don't require them to supervise too many other employees. Now let's take a look at this information, kind of take this information and see if we can apply it to a real basic question. Herman spends his lunch hour drinking beer in his car in the parking lot. This does happen, people, unfortunately. You know, as managers, you may come across this type of situation. So this type of behavior would be what? Evaluating behavior, discerning behavior, counterproductive work behavior, or destructive work behavior. And based on what we just talked about, the answer, of course, is C. This is a counterproductive work behavior.